Hi, my name is Peter. I'm here with Justin, who is a member of the design team, and he's built something really cool, which I think is an excellent addition to our leaderboard. So, Justin, why don't you talk us through it?
Yeah, so we have ranking here, and you can see what the best model is. But one thing that we can't really answer is what's the best model at people's premises, and most of the time it's price. So one of the things we added was a Pareto chart that allows you to see the best performing models at a certain price point. Anything under the Pareto line is a model that's suboptimal compared to the model that's chosen on the Pareto line. So for example, for Kimi or for Grok right here, at that certain price point and at that score, that is the most optimal model to be using at that performance.
So what this is telling us is that even though we've got, for example, Claude Opus 4.6 thinking on top of the leaderboard, if you can't afford Opus, you can keep looking further down the line and see what else might work for you as well.
Absolutely. So I'm a cheapskate, Peter. I look for a model that's very cheap that I could run based on my budget. I tend to go over a lot of my inference budget, and people get mad because I go over my budget. So I want to look for the most optimal model. Right now I've been using Gemini 3 Flash because at that price, at a blended price at $2.38, I can get a lot done with a score of 1474, and then it's literally only 30 points away from Claude Opus 4.6. So,
yeah, for sure. And can you talk us through the scale of the pricing here? Because they do look kind of close together, but the price is really different, right? It really jumps up as you go further to the left.
So it goes from 5 cents all the way up to $100. Your most expensive model right here is actually GPT 4.5 Preview 2025 227. Pretty much at that price point, that's very expensive, but it doesn't perform as well as Claude Opus 4.6, right?
So often, the way we read the data, right, we just look at the leaderboard, but what it really hides is that there could be a model that's maybe 20 places down that actually could be the model that you want to use because it's really cheap, and this is the best price model that you can use.
Yeah.
One thing I was going to ask you is that we can do this not just for the overall text rankings, right? We've got these charts done for all of the different categories as well, so we can pick the right model for the right task as well.
Yeah, even in our text arena here and looking at coding, you can see the different models that are best at coding, or even better yet, just creative writing. Of course, you'll still see Opus 4.6, but one of the biggest surprises is actually seeing Mimo V2 Flash, right? And so that's an open source model, and at that price point of 24 cents for a blended price and getting that is a great model to use, especially with the whole open claw or clawbot movement, finding an open source model and using it at that price point. This is probably one of the best models to use to stay in budget.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point that quite often we might be kind of defaulting, let's just look at the top of the leaderboard. But yeah, if you're generating billions of tokens for something like an open claw, then yeah, maybe you do want to mix it up a little bit. Are there any other categories we should look at that?
Let's look at some fun stuff here. For documents, let's look at documents. So when we get into documents, we can start to see, okay, though we don't have a lot of models on documents, but you have to see which models are actually performing well in terms of reading documents. And you might be surprised that, of course, you have 4.6, that's a whole lot better, but at that price point, 4.5 is still expensive, and yet it scores almost, like 1473, yeah, and look at that price. So that's an interesting one. Let's look at vision, and this is where you actually get to bring visual inputs and translate that into text. And here you start to see that Gemini 3 Pro is actually one of the better models from an optimal standpoint. At $9.50 and a score of 1286, it's one of the better models in terms of getting the most bang for your buck.
Are there any labs that do particularly well? Do you think, do you see them kind of appear more often on the frontier?
And one of the things we get to do with this side filter here is not just look at models, we can just look at labs to see which actually labs are having the best models on here. So based on this vision of Vino, we see that Google's on top, but we also see that Grok is second. I would say second, but the second most optimal model that you could be using based on their price point. You start to see Moonshot's Kimi 2.5, and you start to see Quinn, Alibaba's Quinn 3.5 here. And that's very interesting in terms of like what the labs have, and you start to see, okay, these are some of the top labs. But if you really want to get spicy, let's look at text and look at it from a lab standpoint. You start to see that Anthropic's on top in terms of base, in terms of performance and costs, but you're also starting to see that Google's here, Grok's here. Then you start to see the Chinese models that are coming really close to the American models here with ZAI, Moonshot, and Alibaba. You know what's interesting, what you don't see here is OpenAI.
Yeah. And I guess, where is it? Is it a little bit... it's a little bit lower in the ratings, right? I think, yeah, it's a brutal chart. What do you think about the occupational categories? Are there any interesting things to see in there? Any particular models stand out for any particular subset of tasks?
Well, let's look at mathematical, right? Let's see what's the best model from a mathematical standpoint and which lab is putting out the best. Now you start to see GPT 5.4 is back in the game now, right behind Opus 4.6. So you start to see kind of like, okay, that kind of like switch off. You don't see Grok on here anymore, but you still see Kimi, and you still see Quinn in here.
It is very interesting that you can really pick up some patterns that just the flat leaderboard doesn't allow you to see. Thanks, Justin, for talking us through this. And now you have a really cool way to find the best model that fits your budget and does exactly what you needed to do.